Week 12 of the NFL is almost in the books, and there is a lot to talk about from yesterday's slate of games. I'll give my three main takeaways from Sunday. And Kyrie Irving not traveling with the Nets on their road trip this week, meaning he's going to miss his first game back in Boston. What a shocker. I will talk about the argument that Kyrie Irving's teams are better off without him than with him on the floor. Sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. Hello there, and welcome to episode 39 of Courtside. I'm your host, Andrew Cohen. Today is Monday, November 25th, 2019. It means we had football yesterday, and we got a lot to talk about. Now, before we get started, I have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, Courtside Podcast now has an official Instagram page. It's just called the Courtside Podcast. Nothing fancy there. Please go ahead and follow the Instagram page, as well as the Twitter page too. At the Courtside Pod is the Twitter handle. The link will be in the description. On these pages, yes, I'll go and make a post whenever there's a new episode of the podcast out and give the link for that. But I will also be posting content whenever there's some juicy sports news I want to talk about, but don't have time to talk about it in an episode of the podcast. Now, as always, if you're enjoying the content here on Courtside, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening. Share it with family and friends. I would really, really appreciate it. Second and final announcement. From now on, for the YouTube audience, we will now have some infographics throughout the episodes that will include some of the stats I might reference or a team's upcoming schedule if I start talking about that. Stuff like that will be in those graphics. Today, there will be at least one graphic in this episode, so be on the lookout for that if you are listening on YouTube. Now, let's get into my three main takeaways from yesterday's games around the NFL. First takeaway, Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans are legit, and they are going to win the AFC South. So, quite simply, listen, the record with Marcus Mariota as the starter is 2-4. Not great. With Tannehill, 4-1. Better. Okay, but let's get into the specifics, okay? You look at the offense, passing yards per game. Goes from about 188 to about 238. About 50 more passing yards per game. That's pretty good. Even the rushing yards per game, which makes no sense because Marcus Mariota, much more of a running quarterback than Tannehill, goes from 103 to 147. That's plus 44 rushing yards per game. Overall, an additional 94 yards per game with Tannehill as the starting quarterback. Listen, teams have to respect Tannehill as a passer more than Mariota. Opens up the running game for Derrick Henry, and because Tannehill is a better passer, the passing offense is going to be better. Pretty simple. Now, overall, this is just a different Titans team with Tannehill. Okay. Also, first three wins in the Ryan Tannehill era were all via game-winning drives led by Tannehill in the final stages of the game. Okay, that proves to me that Tannehill is a legit starting quarterback in this league and that he's the man for the job in Tennessee. If you asked me this past offseason what I thought of Ryan Tannehill, I would have told you he's an average quarterback at best. I don't want him as my starting quarterback of my team. But now I think he's a true NFL starting quarterback. I mean, obviously he's not an amazing quarterback, but he's worthy of a starting job. Now here's why I think the Titans win the AFC South. You look at their schedule for the rest of the season. Here it is. At Colts, at Raiders, home versus Texans, home versus Saints, at Texans. So the games against the Colts and Texans are the key ones here. If Tennessee beats the Colts this upcoming week, beats the Texans at least once, they're in the driver's seat to win the AFC South division. Okay, you add in the Raiders game too. That makes 4 games against teams fighting for the last few playoff spots in the AFC. If the Titans can win a few of those games, they just put themselves in a better position to make the playoffs, as well as win their division because they'll be racking up wins. Yeah, that game against the Saints, Week 16, is tough, but it's in Tennessee, and the Saints haven't exactly been perfect since Drew Brees has returned. So, who knows? Maybe they could pull off that win. But the win against Kansas City a couple weeks ago was impressive. Blowing out the Jaguars this week was just very... I mean, that was a dominant performance. I think the Titans are a legit playoff contender. I don't think they're going to get to the Super Bowl. I think the farthest they can get is the AFC title game if they get the right matchups. I'm talking about playing the Ravens and maybe being able to beat them in the divisional round. But overall, the Titans are a legit team in the AFC. Second takeaway from this week, the Packers are not true Super Bowl contenders. They got their butts kicked in San Francisco last night, no doubt about that. They had 2 weeks to prepare because they had the bye week, and they just did not look ready whatsoever. And here's the thing with the Packers. We should have seen this coming. You look at their defense. They average 380.5 yards allowed per game. That's 28th in the league. That's worst among all teams in the playoff picture, AFC or NFC. And 125.5 yards allowed on the ground per game, 26th in the league. They cannot stop the run. They really can't stop the pass well either. They're just not a great defense, which is weird because we've been talking about how great this defense is all season, but you really dig into it, especially against the run, they are not very good. And then on offense, they only put up about 341.5 total yards per game, which means they allow more yards than they put up per game. That's not a good winning formula. Here's the thing. If the Packers go down early, they're in trouble. Okay, they have the third slowest paced offense, and it's an offense that has struggled quite a bit this year. Okay, Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't been his elite self this year. You have to wonder, is he starting to fall off, or is it just the new offense? I think it has to do with the offense a little bit more, just being so slow paced. But, Rodgers right now, the way he's been playing, he's only slightly above average at best. The defense can't stop opponents. So, and specifically on the ground, if teams go up on the Packers and they're trying to control the clock and control the game, they're going to have a lot of success doing that. That's what we saw with the 49ers last night. It's what we've seen time and time again this season. This all sets up the Packers for failure down the stretch and, into the playoffs when they're facing good teams that are going to be able to put up points. If they can't get back into these games, they have no hope of even reaching the Super Bowl or even making a deep playoff run. In my opinion, the Packers are only the 5th best team in the NFC. Okay, the 49ers, Seahawks, Saints, all better than the Packers. I think the Vikings are better than the Packers. Yeah, the Green Bay won back in week 2. But that was back in week 2. Minnesota's a much better team now. Kirk Cousins looks legit. I think when two teams play each other week 16, that's a Minnesota victory. So, yeah, you're the 5th best team in the NFC. That's good considering all the teams that are there, but it just means you're not going to get to the Super Bowl this year. Sorry, Green Bay. Final takeaway. Maybe it's not too much of a takeaway, but I just want to talk about Sean Payton complaining about replay review for pass interference. So let me set the scene really quickly. So late in the game, it's Carolina versus New Orleans in New Orleans. 3rd and 3 for the Panthers on the Saints 6-yard line, about 2 minutes, 20 seconds left. Kyle Allen attempts a pass to receiver Jarius Wright, who gets grabbed by a Saints defender. Ball lands incomplete. It's now 4th down. But wait, Ron Rivera, Panthers head coach, throws the challenge flag, saying there should have been pass interference. And then after review, pass interference is added because the Saints defender, I believe Cameron Gardner-Johnson is his name, that defender did indeed grab Jarius Wright while the ball was in the air. Makes it 1st and goal for Carolina. Now, of course, the Carolina Panthers, being the Carolina Panthers, cannot punch in the touchdown. It gets to 4th down. And their field goal kicker, Joey Sly, misses a 28-yard field goal. So, yeah, he went to the Blair Walsh School of Kicking, forgot how to kick a field goal from within 30 yards, and sets the Saints up for a go-ahead drive that they take advantage of and win the game 34-31. So, okay, Saints victory. Everybody's happy. It's a, pass interference call. It's all wonder under the bridge. Post-game press conference, Sean Payton is furious. He was not happy with that pass interference call being added. Starts whining about it, complaining about it. And, he's like, well, I don't want to get into the specifics. I don't want to talk about the refs too much. But, I was in the meetings all offseason. This is not what we plan to do and all that stuff. Okay, just a lot of whining from him. And listen, I partially get where he's coming from. It wasn't an overly egregious pass interference, but had the interference not occurred, it could have been a touchdown for the Panthers. So here's what I have to say to Sean Payton. Stop whining. Stop complaining. Okay, the rule is in place mainly because you wanted it in place. And listen, yes, America feels bad for you. NFC title game, that was tough. I feel bad for you. I talked about it in my podcast. Saints should have been going to the Super Bowl. Okay? But, come on. Okay, you got your rule in place, but as soon as it doesn't go your way, it's now a problem. You're trying to come up with solutions to improve it, and it's ridiculous. Okay? Please, just stop whining. Stop the complaining. There was clear pass interference there, and if you don't like it, well, that's too bad. You won the game anyways. So the Brooklyn Nets are currently on a 3-game road trip, but Kyrie Irving is not traveling with the team as he is currently dealing with a shoulder injury. Now, third game of the trip, by the way, on Wednesday in Boston against Kyrie's former team, the Celtics. Wow, I cannot believe that Kyrie Irving is going to miss his first game back in Boston. Wow, it's you would think he'd want to be there, right? Listen, I could have told you back when the schedule came out that Kyrie Irving would not play in or even travel to this game, okay? If he were to step foot on the Boston Celtics court right now, he'd be in for an epic booing. It would be unbelievable, the volume and the amount of boos raining down from the stands. But back to the injury, okay? Something very interesting has happened to Brooklyn with Kyrie missing time. They're actually winning games. They are 4-1 without Kyrie in the lineup. And his replacement, Spencer Dinwiddie, just won the NBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week award. And since taking over as a starting point guard with Kyrie sidelined, he's averaging 25 points and just over 6 assists per game as the starter, which those numbers are just slightly below where Kyrie's numbers are. Now, I'm not saying Spencer Dinwiddie's anywhere close to Kyrie Irving because that's just not true. But I think it's interesting to just throw those stats in there. Now, listen, I'm not telling you the Nets are better off without Kyrie, but I am going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here because this is now the third straight season in which the numbers say that Kyrie's team is actually better when he sits out. Right, 2 years ago, Celtics get within one game of the NBA Finals without Kyrie. Last year, I think the Celtics were, 12-2 without Kyrie in the regular season. And this year, the Nets are 4-1 without him, 4-7 with him. Right, there have also been several reports that things are just not going well for Kyrie in Brooklyn in terms of his personality and his attitude. So, not a great start for the Kyrie Irving era in Brooklyn. Now, of course, yes, with Kyrie on the court, they've played significantly more difficult teams than with Dinwiddie as the starting point guard. Okay, they've beaten teams like the Bulls and Knicks with Dinwiddie, but they're playing much more difficult teams with Kyrie on the court. But I do think it's interesting that Kyrie this year has scored 50 in a loss, scored 37 in a loss, scored 28 in a loss, scored 27 in a loss. Putting up big numbers, but not resulting in wins. Okay, this is why when people would say that the Nets would finish as a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference before the season, I thought they were crazy. Okay, they're not on par with the Celtics, the Sixers, the Bucks, the Heat, Pacers, Raptors. Need I go on? Kevin Durant is going to be the key for the Nets' success, not Kyrie Irving. As long as Kyrie Irving's the only superstar on a team, whether that was the Celtics or the Nets, that team's not winning anything. And maybe, just maybe, that team will actually be better off with him on the sidelines rather than on the court. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. If you enjoyed, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening. Leave a like on YouTube, share it with family and friends. I would really appreciate it. Also, go ahead and follow the Courtside podcast on Twitter, on Instagram. Links will be in the description. Tomorrow, talking about Monday Night Football, Ravens-Rams, big matchup. Is Lamar Jackson still the MVP? We'll have to see. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I'll see you next time.